The ice storm hit harder than expected. Tejo pulled his jacket tighter as the wind screamed across the frozen wasteland. He could barely see 10 feet ahead through the swirling snow. The mining equipment needed checking before the storm got worse, or the whole operation would shut down for weeks. Tejo had been alone on this ice planet for 8 months now. Frost 7 was a small mining colony at the edge of known space. Most people couldn't handle the isolation, but Tejo didn't mind. The pay was good, and the silence gave him peace. No crowds, no noise, just him in the endless white landscape. His scanner beeped inside his pocket. Tejo pulled it out with his thick gloves. The screen showed strange energy readings coming from the east, near the ice caves. That was odd. There shouldn't be any power sources out there. The caves were natural formations, empty and unexplored. Tejo hesitated. The smart choice was to go back to his habitat and wait out the storm. But the readings were strong and unusual. If something was malfunctioning out there, it could cause problems later. He changed direction and headed toward the caves. The walk took longer than he expected. The wind pushed against him like a living thing trying to force him back. Ice formed on his goggles, and he had to wipe them clean every few minutes. By the time he reached the cave entrance, his fingers were numb even inside his heated gloves. The cave opening was dark and uninviting. Tejo turned on his headlamp and stepped inside. The wind's howl faded to a distant whisper. Ice covered the walls in thick blue sheets that reflected his light in strange patterns. The temperature inside wasn't much better than outside, but at least the wind couldn't reach him here. His scanner beeped again, more insistent now. The energy source was deeper in the cave. Tejo followed the narrow passage, ducking under low-hanging ice formations. The cave twisted and turned, leading him downward into the planet's frozen heart. Then he saw it. A soft blue glow came from a wider chamber ahead. Tejo slowed his steps and entered carefully. In the center of the chamber sat something that made his heart race. It was an egg, or what remained of one. The shell was crystalline and cracked open, pieces scattered across the ice floor. The blue glow came from inside. Tejo moved closer, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Inside the broken shell, something small and alive trembled. It was a creature unlike anything Tejo had seen in person, though he recognized it from military briefings. The little thing at scales that shimmered even in the dim light, tiny folded wings and a long, delicate tail. It was a Dravxian hatchling. Tejo's first instinct was to step back. The Dravxians were feared across the galaxy. They were warriors, conquerors who showed no mercy. Their empire had destroyed countless human colonies. They were cruel, powerful, and unstoppable. And here was one of their babies, abandoned in a frozen cave. The hatchling was no bigger than a house cat. It lay curled in a ball, shaking violently from the cold. Its scales, which should have been bright and strong, looked dull and frost-covered. The tiny creature's eyes were closed, and its breathing was shallow. It was dying. Tejo knew why it was here. The Dravxians abandoned their weak. Any hatchling that wasn't strong enough was left to die. It was their way of keeping their species powerful. This little one must have been too small, too fragile. Its own kind had sentenced it to death before it even had a chance to live. He should leave. That was a logical choice. This creature, if it survived, would grow into something dangerous. The Dravxians were enemies of humanity. Saving could be seen as treason. At minimum, it would cause him endless problems. But Tejo couldn't move. He stared at the tiny shivering form. The hatchling's eyes opened briefly, just slits of gold in the darkness. There was no hope in those eyes, no expectation of rescue. The baby had already accepted death. It expected nothing from this universe, nothing from anyone. That look broke something in Tejo's heart. He had seen that same empty resignation before, in his own eyes years ago when he lost everything he loved. Back then, someone had helped him when they didn't have to. A stranger had shown him kindness when he expected none. That kindness had saved his life. Tejo made his decision. He pulled off his thermal jacket, immediately feeling the cold bite through his inner layers. He scooped up the tiny dragon carefully. The hatchling was so cold it felt like ice in his hands. He wrapped it in his jacket, holding it close to his chest to share his body heat. The baby didn't struggle. It didn't even seem to care what happened to it. That broke Teo's heart even more. He turned and ran back through the cave as fast as he dared. The storm still raged outside, but Teo barely noticed. All his focus was on the small bundle pressed against his chest. He could feel the weak flutter of its heartbeat through the jacket. The journey back to his habitat took forever. Teo's legs burned from running through the deep snow. His lungs ached from breathing the frozen air. Ice formed in his hair and beard. But he didn't slow down. The little life in his arms was fading fast. Finally, he saw the lights of his habitat through the storm. Teo burst through the airlock and sealed it behind him. The warmth of the heated interior hit him like a wave. He rushed to his medical station, laying the jacket bundle gently on the table. The hatchling looked worse under bright lights. Its scales were turning gray, and frost clung to its tiny body. Teo grabbed medical supplies, his hands shaking from cold and adrenaline. He had basic training in emergency medicine, but nothing had prepared him for this. He didn't even know if human medical equipment would work on a Dravaxian. He started with the basics. Warm blankets, gentle heat, checking for injuries. The baby's temperature was dangerously low. Teo wrapped it in warming blankets and held it close again, using his own body heat. He talked to it softly, nonsense words of comfort that the creature probably couldn't understand. Hours passed. Teo sat on the floor with his back against the wall, the tiny dragon cradled in his arms. He monitored its breathing, its heartbeat, its temperature. Slowly, very slowly, the hatchling began to warm up. Its breathing got a little stronger. The gray color faded from its scales. As dawn light began to filter through the habitat's windows, the hatchling opened its eyes fully for the first time. Those golden eyes stared up at Teo with confusion. The baby didn't understand what was happening. It had expected to die alone in the cold. Instead, it was warm and safe. Teo smiled down at the tiny dragon. His life had just become incredibly complicated. He had no idea how to raise a Dravaxian. He didn't know what it ate, how fast it would grow, or what would happen when others found out. The military would want it. The Dravaxians would want it dead. He could lose everything. But as he looked into those confused golden eyes, Teo knew he had made the right choice. This baby expected nothing from the world. Well, Teo decided he was going to give it everything, starting with something the Dravaxians never gave their young, a chance to live. The first night was the hardest. Teo didn't sleep at all. He sat on his bunk with the tiny dragon wrapped in blankets on his lap. Every few minutes, he checked to make sure it was still breathing. The hatchling was so weak that each breath looked like it might be its last. Teo's habitat was small but comfortable. One main room served as living space, kitchen, and work area. A separate section held his bed and bathroom. Medical supplies lined one wall, meant for human injuries. Now Teo stared at them, wondering what would work on an alien baby. As the hours passed, the hatchling's condition slowly improved. Its body temperature rose to something that felt less like ice and more like warmth. The shivering stopped, but it still wouldn't open its eyes or move much. Teo talked to it constantly, his voice soft and steady. When morning came fully, Teo faced a new problem. The baby needed food. But what did Dravaxians eat? He turned to a computer terminal and accessed the colony's database. Most information about Dravaxians was classified military data. But Teo had high-level clearance as a colony engineer. He started reading everything he could find. The files painted a dark picture. Dravaxians were carnivores, but their young needed specific minerals found only on their home worlds. The hatchlings ate a mixture of crushed crystals and protein. Without the right diet, they would die within days. Teo's stomach sank. He didn't have alien crystals. He was on an ice planet with limited supplies, but he refused to give up. Teo studied the mineral composition listed in the files. Then he checked his mining supplies. The planet had rich mineral deposits. Maybe he could create something close enough. He pulled out his mineral supplements, meant for human consumption, and studied their contents. After an hour of calculations, he created a mixture that might work. Teo ground the minerals into fine powder and mixed them with synthesized protein from his food printer. The result looked like gray paste. He had no idea if it would work, but it was the best he could do. He warmed the mixture slightly and brought it to the hatchling. The baby dragon still lay curled in its blanket nest. Teho dipped his finger in the paste and gently touched it to the creature's mouth. At first, nothing happened. Then the tiny tongue flicked out, tasting. The hatchling's eyes opened slightly. It licked again, more eagerly this time. Relief flooded through Teho. The baby was eating. He fed it slowly, letting it take small amounts. The hatchling ate more than he expected, its small body desperate for nutrition. When it finally stopped, it let out a small sound, something between a chirp and a sigh. Then it closed its eyes and slept. Teho finally allowed himself to rest. He set an alarm for 2 hours and lay down on his bunk, the hatchling in a warm box beside him. He fell asleep instantly, exhausted from the long night. The alarm woke him too soon. But when Teho checked on the baby, he found good news. The dragon's scales looked brighter. Its breathing was stronger. The creature even lifted its head when Teho approached. He fed it again, and this time the hatchling ate with more energy. For 3 days, this became Teho's routine. Feed the baby every 2 hours. Keep it warm. Watch for any signs of sickness. The hatchling grew stronger each day. By the 3rd day, it could stand on wobbly legs. It made small chirping sounds when Teho entered the room. The tiny dragon was surviving. On the 4th day, everything changed. Teho's communication terminal beeped. It was a video call from Hyojin, his supervisor on the orbital station. She ran the mining operation and checked in with Teho once a week. He had been dreading this call. Teho accepted the call. Hyojin's face appeared on the screen. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She smiled at first, but then her expression changed. She was looking at something behind Teho. He turned around. The hatchling had climbed out of his box and was stumbling across the floor toward him, chirping. Teho's heart sank. He had forgotten to put the baby away before answering the call. Hyojin's voice was deadly quiet. Teho, what is that? There was no point in lying. It's a Dravaxian hatchling. I found it abandoned in the ice caves 4 days ago. Hyojin stood up from her desk, her face going pale. You found a Dravaxian baby and you didn't report it? Do you understand how serious this is? Teho picked up the chirping hatchling and held it gently. It was dying, Hyojin. I couldn't leave it there. It's a Dravaxian. Hyojin's voice rose. Their species has killed thousands of our people. They've destroyed entire colonies. And you brought one into your habitat. It's a baby, Teho said quietly. It hadn't hurt anyone. Its own kind left it to die because it was too small. Hyojin paced in her office, running her hands through her hair. You need to contact military command immediately. They'll send a ship to collect it. This isn't a decision you can make alone. I'm not giving it to the military. Teho's voice was firm. The hatchling snuggled against his chest, still chirping softly. They'll either kill it or turn it into a weapon. This baby deserves better than that. Deserves? Hyojin stared at him. Teho, listen to yourself. That thing will grow up to be a killer. It's in their nature. Maybe, Teho said. Or maybe they become killers because of how they're raised. This one won't be raised that way. I'm going to give it a chance. Hyojin sat down slowly. She looked tired suddenly. This will end your career. You know that, right? When corporate finds out, when the military finds out, they'll come for you. They might arrest you. They'll definitely take the hatchling. Let them try. Teho stroked the baby dragon's head gently. It had stopped chirping and was watching him with those golden eyes. I made a choice, Hyojin. I'm standing by it. There was a long silence. Hyojin studied Teho's face through the screen. Finally, she sighed. You always were stubborn. What are you going to do with it? Raise it. Teach it. Show it that there's a different way to live than violence and cruelty. And you think that will work? I have to try. Teho looked down at the hatchling. When I found it, this baby expected nothing. It had given up on living. Someone needs to show it that the universe can be kind. That might as well be me. Hyojin was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke carefully. I'm required to report this, Teho. You understand that? I understand. But maybe my report gets delayed. Maybe the storm damaged communications. Maybe I don't file it for a week or two. Hyojin's expression softened slightly. That gives you time to figure things out. But Taeho, please be careful. The situation is dangerous in ways you can't imagine. Thank you, Hyojin. She shook her head. Don't thank me. I think you're making a terrible mistake. But I also think you're doing it for the right reasons. Just promise me you'll be prepared for what comes next. I promise. The call ended. Taeho sat down, still holding the hatchling. The baby dragon looked up at him and chirped again, a sound that was almost cheerful. It didn't understand the danger they were both in now. It only knew that someone was taking care of it, feeding it, keeping it warm. For the first time in its short life, it felt safe. Taeho smiled despite his worries. He needed to name the baby. He couldn't keep calling it the hatchling forever. He thought about it while the little dragon fell asleep in his arms. Finally, a name came to him. Kian. It meant foundation or origin. This baby would be the foundation of something new, a bridge between two species that had only known war. Hello, Kian. Taeho whispered to the sleeping dragon. Welcome to your new life. I promise you, it's going to be better than the one you were born into. Outside, the ice storm had finally ended. The planet's sun shone weakly through the clouds. A new day was beginning, full of unknown challenges. But Taeho wasn't afraid. He had made his choice. He would protect Kian no matter what came next. The baby expected nothing that night in the cave. Now Taeho was determined to give him everything. 3 weeks passed faster than Taeho expected. Kian grew at an alarming rate. The tiny creature that once fit in Taeho's hands was now the size of a medium dog. His scales had brightened to a beautiful silver-blue color that caught the light. His wings, though still too small for flight, had grown stronger. He could fold and unfold them with precision. But the most remarkable change was in Kian's behavior. The baby dragon followed Taeho everywhere. When Taeho worked on equipment repairs, Kian sat beside him watching with intense focus. When Taeho ate, Kian chirped until he got his own food. When Taeho slept, Kian curled up at the foot of his bunk, one eye always cracked open to watch over him. The bond between them had grown deep. Kian made different sounds now, not just chirps, but a whole range of noises that Taeho was learning to understand. A low rumble meant contentment. Quick chirps meant excitement. A soft trill meant Kian wanted attention. They were learning to communicate. One morning, Taeho was repairing a heater unit when Kian did something unexpected. The baby dragon picked up a small wrench in his mouth and brought it to Taeho. It was the exact tool Taeho needed next. Taeho stared in surprise. Kian had been watching him work so carefully that he understood what tools were needed and when. Good boy, Kian, Taeho said, taking the wrench. Kian's whole body wiggled with pleasure at the praise. His tail wagged like a happy dog. But Kian's helpfulness sometimes caused problems. One afternoon, Taeho found the dragon baby trying to help with welding. Kian had breathed a tiny stream of fire at a metal joint, tried to copy what Taeho did with his torch. The fire was weak and couldn't damage much, but it melted a plastic container nearby. Taeho had to teach Kian that some kinds of help were dangerous. The baby dragon seemed to understand. He looked sad when Taeho explained the problem, those golden eyes filled with something like regret. It amazed Taeho how much emotion Kian could show. Everything he had read about Gervaxians said they were cold and emotionless, but Kian was neither of those things. On the 22nd day, Hyojin called again. Her face on the screen looked worried. Taeho, we have a situation. Corporate is sending someone to inspect the colony. A xenobiologist named Doyen. He's coming to evaluate Kian. Taeho's chest tightened. When? He'll arrive tomorrow. I couldn't delay the report any longer. Too many people noticed the supply orders you've been placing. Someone figured out you were feeding something that wasn't human. Kian was sleeping in his corner, his sides rising and falling with deep breaths. Taeho looked at him and felt protective anger rise in his chest. What does this Doyen want? To determine if Kian is dangerous. If he decides Kian is a threat, Corporate will order him removed. I'm sorry, Taeho. I did what I could. After the call ended, Taeho sat beside Kian. The dragon baby woke up and immediately nuzzled against him. making happy sounds. Teho scratched behind Kian's small horns, a spot the baby loved. How could anyone think this creature was dangerous? The next day, a shuttle landed near Teho's habitat. Teho watched through the window as a man in a corporate uniform stepped out. Doyen was younger than Teho expected, maybe in his early 30s. He carried scanning equipment and wore the expression of someone who expected to find a monster. Teho opened the door before Doyen could knock. "Come in." Doyen entered cautiously, his eyes scanning the room. They landed on Kian, who was playing with a piece of metal, tossing it in the air and catching it. The dragon baby noticed a stranger and moved closer to Teho, uncertain. "That's a Dravaxian hatchling," Doyen said, his voice carefully neutral. "His name is Kian." Teho kept his hand on Kian's head. The baby leaned against his leg. Doyen set down his equipment. "I need to run some tests. Scan his brain activity, check his development, assess his threat level." "He's not a threat. He's a baby. He's a Dravaxian baby. There's a difference." But Doyen's eyes showed curiosity more than fear. He pulled out a scanner. "May I approach him?" Teho nodded. "Kian, this is Doyen. He's not going to hurt you." Kian chirped nervously, but didn't move away as Doyen came closer. The xenobiologist moved slowly, letting Kian sniff his hand first. Then he began scanning, his device beeping and recording data. Kian watched the scanner with interest, his head tilting from side to side. "Fascinating," Doyen muttered. "His brain activity is much higher than expected for a hatchling this age. He's processing complex information." Teho felt a small surge of pride. "He's smart. Yesterday he brought me the right tools while I was working. He watches everything and learns." Doyen continued his scans, moving around Kian carefully. The baby dragon lost his nervousness and started showing off, picking up objects and bringing them to Doyen like gifts. A bowl, a piece of cloth, even one of Teho's boots. Each time, Doyen accepted the gift and thanked him, which made Kian even more excited. After an hour of tests, Doyen sat down heavily in a chair. He stared at his scanner data with a stunned expression. This shouldn't be possible. What shouldn't be possible? His empathy centers. Doyen looked up at Teho. The parts of the brain that process emotional connections and social bonding. In normal Dravaxians, these areas are underdeveloped, almost dormant. But in Kian, they're highly active, more active than in most humans. Teho sat down beside Doyen. "What does that mean?" "It means you've proven something scientists have argued about for decades. Nature versus nurture. Dravaxians aren't born cruel. They become cruel because of how they're raised. Their culture abandons weak hatchlings and treats the survivors with brutality. That shapes their brains. But Kian was raised with kindness. You talked to him, cared for him, showed him affection. His brain developed differently because of it." The weight of those words settled over both men. Kian, oblivious of the significance of the conversation, was now trying to climb into Doyen's lap, wanting more attention from a new human. Doyen laughed and helped Kian settle. The baby dragon rumbled contentedly. "He's not dangerous at all, is he? He's just a child who wants love. That's what I've been trying to tell everyone," Teho said quietly. Doyen's expression grew serious. "But this creates a bigger problem, Teho. If word gets out about Kian, both the human military and the Dravaxian Empire will want him. The military will want to study him, maybe try to replicate this, use it as a weapon or advantage. The Dravaxians will want him dead because he proves their way of raising young is wrong. He threatens their entire culture. So what do we do?" Before Doyen could answer, both their communication devices beeped simultaneously. It was an emergency alert. Teho pulled up the message and felt his blood run cold. 2 ships had been detected entering the system. One was human military. The other was Dravaxian. "They already know," Doyen whispered. "Someone leaked the information." Teho looked at Kian, who was looking up at him with trusting golden eyes. The baby dragon sensed his fear and made a questioning sound. Teho picked him up, holding him close even though Kian was getting heavy. "No one is taking him," Teho said firmly. "I don't care if it's the military or the Dravaxians or anyone else. Kian stays with me." Doyen stood up and started gathering his equipment. Then we need to prepare. Both ships will be here within hours. And Tejo, you need to understand something. This isn't just about you and Kian anymore. What happens next could change everything between humans and Dravaxians, for better or worse. Outside the window, storm clouds were gathering again over the ice planet. But the real storm was coming from the stars above. Tejo held Kian tighter. The baby dragon wrapped his tail around Tejo's arm and made a soft protective rumble. Even though Kian was still young, he knew something was wrong, and in his own way, he was trying to protect the human who had saved his life. Tejo made a promise then, silent but strong. Whatever came through that door, whatever forces tried to separate them, he would fight. Kian had expected nothing that night in the cave. Tejo had given him everything, and he wasn't about to let anyone take it away. The human military ship landed first. It touched down on the ice field with precision, its weapons clearly visible on the hull. Tejo watched from his window as soldiers in combat armor filed out. Leading them was a woman with commander insignia on her uniform. She walked with authority, her face set in hard lines. Tejo had moved Kian to the back room, but the baby dragon refused to stay hidden. He kept coming back to Tejo's side, sensing the danger. Doyen stood near the door, his face pale but determined. He had chosen to stay and help rather than leave on the shuttle. The commander knocked sharply on the door. Tejo opened it slowly. The woman stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her soldiers following. Her eyes immediately found Kian, who pressed against Tejo's legs and made a low warning sound. "I'm Commander Mira," the woman said. "I'm here to secure the Dravaxian specimen for military research." "He's not a specimen," Tejo said firmly. "His name is Kian, and he's under my protection." Commander Mira's expression didn't change. "Sir, you have no authority to harbor an enemy alien. The creature must be transferred to military custody immediately for study. We need to understand how Dravaxians develop, how they think, how they can be defeated." "He's a baby," Doyen spoke up. "My analysis shows he poses no threat. In fact, he demonstrates that Dravaxians can be peaceful if raised properly, which makes him even more valuable to study," Mira countered. "We could learn how to modify their species, create weapons against them, or develop psychological warfare tactics." Kian made a frightened sound at the harsh tone in Mira's voice. He tried to hide behind Tejo, his wings folding tight against his body. Tejo felt anger surge through him. "You want to turn him into a weapon. That's not going to happen." Before Mira could respond, every communication device in the room beeped with an alert. The Dravaxian ship had arrived. It hovered above the colony, dark and menacing against the gray sky. A single transport pod detached and descended toward them. Mira's hand moved to her weapon. Her soldiers raised their rifles, pointing them at the door. Tejo moved to stand in front of Kian, shielding him with his body. The baby dragon whimpered softly. The door opened without permission. A Dravaxian warrior stepped inside, and the room seemed to shrink around him. He was massive, at least 7 feet tall, covered in dark red scales. His wings were folded but still impressive. Battle scars marked his armor. This was a warrior who had seen countless fights. The soldiers aimed their weapons at him, but the Dravaxian didn't seem concerned. His eyes, cold and yellow, scanned the room until they found Kian. Something like disgust crossed his face. "I am Vorik." His voice was deep and harsh. "I have come for the defective hatchling." Kian made a sound of pure fear and scrambled to hide completely behind Tejo. The baby was shaking, his scales rattling together. He had never seen another Dravaxian before, but some instinct told him this one meant danger. "You're not taking him," Tejo said, though his voice shook slightly. Vorik was terrifying up close, but Tejo didn't back down. Vorik's eyes focused on Tejo for the first time. "Human, you do not understand our ways. The weak must be eliminated. This hatchling was left to die because it was too small, too fragile. It should not exist. Maybe your ways are wrong," Tejo shot back. "Maybe throwing away your children just because they're small is the real weakness." Vorik's expression darkened dangerously. Commander Mira stepped forward. "The human government has claimed custody of this creature. You have no authority here, Dravaxian." And you have no authority to keep what belongs to the Dravxian Empire, Vorik growled. The hatchling must be destroyed. It is our law. He's not property. Teo's voice rose. He's a living being who deserves a chance to live. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Soldiers had weapons aimed at Vorik. Vorik's hand rested on his own weapon. Doyen stood frozen, knowing that any fight would end badly for humans. And Kian trembled behind Teo, understanding that everyone in this room wanted to take him away. Then Kian did something that shocked everyone. He stepped out from behind Tejo. The baby dragon was still shaking with fear, but he moved to stand between Tejo and the others. He spread his small wings as wide as they would go, trying to look bigger than he was. And then he spoke. Tejo, father. The words were rough and broken, spoken in human language, but they were clear enough. Everyone in the room froze. Kian had never spoken before. Tejo hadn't even known he could. But the baby dragon looked up at him with those golden eyes and said it again, stronger this time. Father. Vorik looked genuinely shocked for the first time. Impossible. Dravxians do not have concepts of parenthood. We do not bond with caretakers. We do not speak other languages by choice. Maybe they don't, Doyen said quietly, because you never give them the chance. You abandon them or raise them in brutality. Kian was raised with love. Look at what he became. Commander Mira lowered her weapon slightly. She was staring at Kian with a new expression, something almost like wonder. It speaks. It understands complex emotional relationships. This changes everything. It changes nothing, Vorik said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. The hatchling has been corrupted by human weakness. It must be eliminated before this corruption spreads. Corrupted? Tejo moved to stand beside Kian, placing his hand on the baby dragon's head. You mean shown kindness? Taught that there's more to life than violence? If that's corruption, then I'm proud to be corrupt. Kian leaned into Teo's touch and made a soft protective rumble. Despite his fear, despite being surrounded by beings much larger and stronger than himself, he stood his ground. He was protecting the one who had protected him. The standoff continued. Vorik and Commander Mira both wanted Kian, though for different reasons. The soldiers were nervous, fingers on triggers. Doyen was quietly recording everything on his device, knowing this moment was historic. Then Hyojin's voice came through the communication system, speaking to everyone in the room. All parties need to stand down. I'm transmitting legal documents to all of you now. Documents that declare Kian as a sentient being with legal rights under the Sentient Being Protection Act. He's not property. He's not a weapon. He's a person. How did you get those papers processed? Doyen asked in amazement. I filed them 3 weeks ago, Hyojin's voice said, and I had lawyers working on it ever since. As of 2 hours ago, they were approved by the Colonial Court. Kian has legal protection. Taking him by force would be kidnapping. Commander Mira looked frustrated. Vorik's expression was unreadable, but both of them hesitated. Legal complications were something even military commanders and alien warriors had to consider. Tejo felt hope bloom in his chest. He looked down at Kian, who was still pressed against his side. The baby dragon looked up at him with complete trust. Whatever happened next, Kian believed Tejo would protect him. This isn't over, Commander Mira said finally. We'll be filing appeals. The military has a right to study potentially dangerous aliens. Study him all you want, Doyen said, holding up a scanner. I have 3 weeks of data showing he's not dangerous at all. He's a child who loves his father. There's nothing threatening about that. Vorik stared at Kian for a long moment. Something complicated passed through the warrior's eyes. You are making a mistake. Human. That creature will grow. Its instincts will emerge. One day it will turn on you. No, Tejo said with absolute certainty. He won't, because I'm teaching him a better way. Vorik turned and left without another word. His transport pod lifted off moments later. Commander Mira and her soldiers followed, though Mira paused at the door. This isn't over, Tejo. You made powerful enemies today, both human and alien. I can live with that, Tejo said. When everyone had left, the habitat felt suddenly quiet. Tejo sat down heavily, his legs shaking from adrenaline. Kian immediately climbed into his lap, even though he was really too big for it now. The baby dragon nuzzled against Tejo's chest and repeated the word he had learned. Father. Tejo wrapped his arms around Kian and held him tight. Yes, little one, I'm your father, and nobody is going to take you away from me. I promise. Doyen sat down across from them, looking exhausted but relieved. You know they'll be back. Both of them. This fight isn't finished. I know, Tejo said, but we won this round, and we'll keep winning. Because Kian deserves to grow up free and safe. Outside, the ice planet sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Inside the habitat, a human and a dragon baby sat together, their bond stronger than any law or military force. Kian had expected nothing that night in the cave. Now, he had everything that mattered. He had a father who would never abandon him. 6 months had passed since that tense day in the habitat. Everything had changed, and yet the most important things stayed the same. Tejo and Kian were still together, and their bond had only grown stronger. They no longer lived on the ice planet. With help from Hyojin and Doyen, they had relocated to a neutral world called Haven. It was a green planet with forests and meadows, a place where the temperature didn't try to kill you. The colony government had granted them land to build something special. The sanctuary sat in a valley surrounded by hills. It was a collection of buildings designed by Doyen to meet the needs of Dervaxian hatchlings. Warm sleeping areas, open spaces to practice flying, and plenty of room to play and learn. Right now, it housed 7 young dragons, including Kian. Kian had grown considerably. He was now the size of a large horse, his wings fully developed and capable of short flights. His scales had darkened to a deep blue silver, and small horns curved back from his head. But despite his size and impressive appearance, he was still gentle, still kind, still the same baby who had learned love before he learned violence. Tejo stood in the main courtyard, watching Kian play with 3 smaller hatchlings. These babies had been brought to the sanctuary over the past few months. Like Kian, they had been abandoned by their kind for being too small or having some perceived weakness. Unlike Kian, they had been found by sympathetic Dervaxian scouts who couldn't bear to leave them to die. The smallest hatchling, a female with green scales, tumbled over her own feet while chasing a ball. She chirped in frustration. Kian immediately went to her, making soothing sounds. He helped her up gently with his snout and showed her how to move her feet more carefully. The little one tried again, this time succeeding. She chirped happily and Kian's whole body showed pride. He's good with them, Doyen said, walking up beside Tejo. The xenobiologist had become a permanent resident of the sanctuary, studying the hatchlings and documenting their development. His research was changing scientific understanding of Dervaxian psychology. He's a natural teacher, Tejo agreed. Yesterday he taught 2 of them how to control their fire breath, so they don't accidentally hurt anyone. Ambassador Jaiwin joined them, a tablet in her hands. She was a human diplomat who had taken interest in the sanctuary. Her support had been crucial in keeping military forces and hostile Dervaxians away. I have news. The Colonial Council approved our expansion request. We can take in 15 more hatchlings. That's wonderful, Tejo said, but his smile faded slightly. But will there be 15 more to save? The Dervaxians don't abandon many. Actually, Jaiwin said carefully, we're getting messages from inside Dervaxian space. Some of their people are starting to question the practice of abandoning weak hatchlings. Word about Kian has spread. They've seen videos of him, healthy and strong, doing things adult Dervaxians can't do, like showing compassion. Before anyone could respond, a ship appeared in the sky. It was large and bore Dervaxian markings, but these were different from military vessels. This ship was ancient in design, decorated with symbols that spoke of wisdom rather than war. Tejo felt tension rise in his shoulders. Kian noticed immediately and came to his side, standing protectively. The other hatchlings scurried to hide behind the older dragon. They had learned to trust Kian to keep them safe. The ship landed smoothly in the designated area. A ramp extended, and a single figure emerged. It was an old Dervaxian, his scales faded to gray with age. He moved slowly but with dignity. This was someone important. That's Elder Thrawn, Jaiwin whispered, one of the oldest living Dravxians. He's part of their ruling council. Teho's hand rested on Kian's shoulder. The young dragon rumbled nervously, but held his ground. They walked forward together to meet the elder. Doyen and Jaiwin followed at a distance, ready to help if needed. Elder Thrawn stopped a respectful distance away. His ancient eyes studied Kian with intense interest. Then they moved to Teho. You are the human who saved the abandoned one. I'm Teho, and yes, I found Kian dying in a cave and chose to help him. I came to see the sanctuary, to witness what should not be possible. Thrawn's voice was rough with age. May I walk your grounds? Teho nodded, surprised by the polite request. He had expected demands or threats, not courtesy. They walked slowly through the sanctuary, Thrawn observing everything. They passed a classroom where young hatchlings learned mathematics. They saw a medical bay where a hatchling with an injured wing received gentle care. They watched the play yard where dragon babies practiced flying under Kian's careful supervision. Thrawn said nothing for a long time. His expression was unreadable. Finally, they reached a garden where the smallest hatchlings napped in the sun, their bellies full and their faces peaceful. The old Dravxian stared at this scene for several minutes. This is not the Dravxian way, Thrawn said quietly. No, Teho agreed. It's a better way. Thrawn turned to face him. To Teho's shock, the elder's eyes were wet with something that looked like tears. You misunderstand. Human. I did not say it was wrong. I said it was not our current way. But it was once. Long ago, before war and survival became our only values, we were different. Teho stared at the ancient Dravxian. What do you mean? I am old enough to remember the stories of old, Thrawn said, passed down from elders before me. Once, my kind cared for our young. We taught them, protected them, loved them. But centuries of war changed us. We began to see compassion as weakness. We started abandoning our vulnerable young to create stronger warriors. Generation after generation, we became more brutal. We forgot who we were. Kian moved closer, listening intently. The other hatchlings had crept out to listen too, sensing something important was happening. You're human. Thrawn looked at Kian now. He did not teach you something new. He reminded us of something ancient, something we lost. One of the small hatchlings, braver than the others, approached Thrawn. The little green female looked up at him and chirped a greeting. Thrawn stared down at her, and something broke in his ancient face. He slowly lowered himself to the ground and let the baby sniff his hand. The hatchling chirped happily and climbed into his lap. More hatchlings approached, curious and fearless. They had been raised without fear of adults, taught that big people meant safety and care. They swarmed around Thrawn, chirping and playing, treating him like any other caretaker. Thrawn sat among the babies and wept openly. I had forgotten this was possible. We all had. Teho sat down beside him, Kian settling on his other side. It's not too late to remember. These babies prove that Dravxians can be different. They can be strong and kind. Some of my people will never accept this, Thrawn said. They will call it corruption, weakness. They will fight to preserve our brutal ways. But some will accept it, Jaiwin added, joining the circle. We've already received requests from Dravxian families asking if they can visit. Some of your people want change. Thrawn looked around at the hatchlings playing peacefully. I will support the sanctuary. I will use my position on the council to protect it. And I will send more abandoned babies here. But Teho, you must understand. What you started here is bigger than just saving a few hatchlings. You are changing the future of an entire species. I just wanted to save one baby who was dying in the cold. Teho said softly, I didn't plan any of this. The best revolutions often start with one small act of kindness, Thrawn replied. As the sun set over Haven, the group sat together in the garden. Hatchlings played around them, their happy sounds filling the air. Kian leaned against Teho, and the smallest green hatchling had fallen asleep in Thrawn's arms. The ancient Dravxian held her carefully, as if remembering how to be gentle. That night, after Thrawn had left with promises of support and protection, Teho helped settle all the hatchlings for sleep. Kian, though grown large, still insisted on sleeping near Teho. The young dragon curled up on a large cushion beside Teho's bed. Big brother Kian, one of the babies, called out sleepily, "Tell story." Kian had learned to speak several languages now. His voice was deep but gentle. "Which story do you want?" "Tell about the cold night," another baby requested. "When father found you." Kian looked at Teho, who nodded with a smile. The young dragon began to speak, telling the story of a night when he expected nothing, when he had given up on living. He told of the human who found him and chose kindness over logic. He told of warmth and food and safety. He told of learning that the universe could be gentle. The baby hatchlings listened with wide eyes. These stories taught them that they were valued, that being small or different didn't mean they deserved abandonment. They learned that love was real and that family could be chosen. When Kian finished, all the babies were asleep. He looked at Teho with those same golden eyes that had once held no hope. Now they shone with contentment and purpose. "Thank you, Father," Kian said quietly, "for everything." Teho reached over and scratched behind Kian's horns, the spot he still loved. "You expected nothing that night, little one. Look what we built together." Kian's eyes drifted closed, a peaceful rumble in his chest. Outside, the stars shone bright over Haven. In orbit, ships from many worlds watched the sanctuary with interest, some with hope, some with fear, some with wonder. But in the sanctuary, none of that mattered. Here, dragon babies learned to play and laugh. They learned that they were precious. They learned that different could be beautiful. And they learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose kindness. Teho closed his eyes, surrounded by sleeping hatchlings. He had come to an ice planet looking for solitude. Instead, he had found family. He had found purpose. One cold night, he had given everything to a dying baby who expected nothing. That baby had given him everything in return. And together, they were changing the galaxy one rescued hatchling at a time.